All right, strap in, everyone. We're diving headfirst into Primer. It's one of those films that leaves you thinking, wait, what just happened? You know?
Oh, yeah. It definitely makes you want to grab a notepad and start mapping out timelines.
Totally. And that's why we're here. We've combed through articles, analyses, you name it. We even ventured into those internet forums where folks are still debating the ending years later.
Seriously, years later.
Right. We're here to make sense of it all.
And maybe a good place to kick things off is by addressing some of the common misconceptions about the time travel in Primer. Because honestly, it's easy to get tripped up.
Yeah, big time. I remember the first time I watched it, I was like, okay, they go back, it creates a new timeline, simple as that, just like Back to the Future. But from what we've gathered, it's not that straightforward.
Not even close.
Right.
Primer doesn't work with just one alternate timeline. Every single time they use that box, they're not splitting off from the original.
Wow.
They're creating a brand new one.
Hold on. So every time, we're talking potentially tons of these timelines all running at the same time. No wonder I was so lost.
It's a lot to process. And what's really wild is that the film uses this complexity to show us what the characters are going through.
Yeah.
They're making this tangled mess of possibilities, and even they can't keep it all straight.
So we're basically thrown into this confusing world right along with them.
Exactly. You're experiencing that disorientation firsthand.
And speaking of disorientation, one of the sources we found mentions a pretty big limitation to their time travel. It's not like they can just go anywhere in time, right?
Nope, no hopping around the timeline willy-nilly. You can only travel back to when the machine was first activated. That's the hard limit.
So no going back to see the dinosaurs then, huh?
Afraid not. No dinosaur adventures in this one.
Too bad. Oh, and there's another thing the film doesn't exactly spell out. Apparently they can't just pop in and out of the box instantly.
Yes. The waiting game.
Right. So if they were in the box for, say, an hour, they'd have to sit tight for another hour before they could even go back to their starting point.
Precisely. Think of it like the machine needs to recharge, and they're stuck waiting for it to power up.
That's not the kind of time travel you see in most movies. Definitely adds to the confusion.
It does. And then on top of all that, they throw in all this super technical jargon. It's like they're speaking a secret language.
Yeah, I actually read that the director, Shane Carruth, is an engineer himself. Apparently, he really wanted to capture how engineers talk and think, which makes sense. But for those of us who didn't study engineering, well...
Yeah, it makes things a tad more challenging.
To say the least. I mean, one of the articles even suggested that all that jargon isn't just about realism, it's actually hiding information from us.
Ooh. Interesting, like a puzzle waiting to be solved.
Exactly. We have to really pay attention, put the pieces together ourselves. But the dialogue isn't the only thing that makes Primer a brain twister. The way the story unfolds, all jumbled up in time, that adds a whole other layer of complexity.
Oh, absolutely. We're not dealing with a simple linear story here. It jumps around constantly, showing us different points in time without making it clear how they connect.
It's like the film itself is a time machine, messing with our perception of what happens first, what causes what, and if anything is actually fixed in this world of shifting timelines.
And all that jumping around, it's not just a stylistic choice. It actually mirrors the nature of time travel itself. Cause and effect can get really muddled.
So we're not just watching characters traveling through time, we're experiencing that temporal distortion right along with them.
Right. And this whole manipulation of time, it opens the door to some serious paradoxes.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that scene where Aaron's trying to prevent a fight, but ends up causing it by going back.
Classic causal loop. It makes your brain hurt just thinking about it.
Tell me about it. And it makes you wonder, with all this complexity, was the filmmaker deliberately trying to mess with our minds?
It's definitely a question worth pondering. It does feel like he wants us to work for our understanding, to actively engage with the film rather than just passively watching it.
So maybe the confusion is part of the point. Maybe it's not about getting clear-cut answers, but about grappling with those big questions about time, identity, free will, all that stuff.
Exactly. It's a film that makes you think, even if you don't always understand what's going on.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here. Time travel myths busted, jargon decoded, at least a little bit, and we've touched on the whole non-linear storytelling thing. But there's still so much more to unpack. Ready to dive even deeper?
Lead the way. I'm ready to see where this rabbit hole goes.
All right, buckle up. Because next, we're tackling those dense technical conversations head on. We'll try to decipher the jargon and see what clues we can uncover. Stay tuned.
We'll be back in a flash, so don't go anywhere. Welcome back to our deep dive into Primer.
All right, so let's try to crack the code on some of that technical jargon we were talking about earlier. I'll admit, I definitely had to rewind a few scenes just to try and catch all the terms they were throwing around. It was a lot.
Yeah, it can feel like you need an engineering degree just to follow along.
Right.
But I actually think that's part of what makes this film so brilliant.
You mean the fact that it's so confusing?
Well, yes and no. One of the articles we read suggested that all that jargon isn't just there to make us feel like outsiders. It actually serves a specific purpose in the story.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, think about it. The characters in Primer are inventors, engineers who are working on something incredibly complex, groundbreaking stuff. And their language, all that jargon, reflects their deep understanding of this technology.
So the jargon is a way of showing us their expertise without dumbing things down, letting us into their world a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there's another layer to it, too. By using this dense technical language, the film also creates a sense of mystery and obfuscation. We're forced to decipher the meaning, to work for our understanding. Kind of like the characters are struggling to grasp the full implications of their invention.
It's like we're eavesdropping on a conversation that we're not supposed to fully understand. It makes us feel like we're right there in the thick of things with them, trying to piece together the puzzle.
And that ties back to the film's overall themes of uncertainty and unintended consequences. The characters themselves are often confused, unsure of what's happening or what they've created.
So the jargon isn't just about realism. It's about setting a mood, creating an atmosphere of mystery and unease.
Precisely. It's mirroring the character state of mind, pulling the audience into that same headspace.
You know, I hadn't thought about it that way before. It definitely makes me appreciate the film's use of language on a whole new level. But even if we could decipher all the technical stuff, there's still the challenge of figuring out what's actually happening in the story because of the way it's told. All that jumping around in time.
Oh, right, the non-linear storytelling. The film definitely doesn't present events in a straightforward chronological order.
Yeah.
It's all over the place, giving us snippets of different moments without always making it clear how they fit together.
One of the sources we found actually argued that this fragmented narrative structure is a reflection of how our memories work, especially when we're dealing with something as mind-bending as time travel.
That's an interesting point. Think about it. Our memories aren't perfect recordings of the past, are they? They're fragmented, subjective, often unreliable.
So the film's nonlinear storytelling is actually mimicking the experience of trying to recall a past event, especially one that involves multiple timelines, multiple versions of yourself. It's like trying to piece together a broken mirror.
Exactly. And it also ties into the theme of identity that runs throughout the film. As the characters move through these different timelines, their sense of self becomes fragmented, just like the narrative.
It's almost as if the film is asking us to question what identity even means in a world where you can meet different versions of yourself. It challenges that notion of a fixed, unchanging self.
And with this manipulation of time, you inevitably get those paradoxes and causal loops that we talked about before.
Like that scene with Aaron trying to prevent the fight, but his actions actually cause it to happen. It's like the film is telling us that no matter how much you try to control things, you can't escape the consequences of your actions, even with time travel.
One of the sources we read suggested that these causal loops aren't just plot devices, they're metaphors for the complex relationship between choice and destiny.
So even if we have free will, are there still certain events, certain outcomes that are just meant to be, like it's all part of some grand design?
It's definitely a mind-bending concept. And the film doesn't give us any easy answers. It just presents these complex ideas and lets the viewer wrestle with them.
Which is what makes it such a fascinating film, even if it is a little frustrating at times.
Right. It's a puzzle box that invites us to keep searching for solutions, even if those solutions might be elusive.
You know, for a film about time travel, Primer really makes you think about the present moment, about the choices we're making right now, and the ripples they might create in the future. It's like a cautionary tale, urging us to think carefully about our actions, both big and small. But I'm curious, what's resonating with you the most so far? What are you finding most intriguing or maybe even perplexing about this film?
Honestly, I'm still grappling with the idea of multiple timelines. And with all this talk about paradoxes and causal loops, it makes me wonder if free will even exists in the world of Primer.
That's a great question, and one that I think we should explore further. But before we get too deep into those philosophical weeds, maybe we should shift gears and consider some of the broader implications of Primer. You know, what it says about our relationship with technology, our fascination with manipulating time, things like that.
Definitely. In the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore those bigger picture questions, connecting Primer to our own lives and the world around us.
Stay with us because we're going even deeper into the mind-bending world of Primer.
And we're back, ready for the final leg of our Primer journey.
Let's do it. If you're still with us at this point, your brain must be working overtime.
We've tackled those time travel mechanics, deciphered at least some of the jargon.
Keyword, some.
Right. But now it's time to zoom out a bit. What does Primer have to say about us, about humanity, our relationship with technology, the choices we make, all that good stuff?
You know, going through these sources, one thing really hit me. Primer isn't just about time travel. It's a cautionary tale.
Oh, absolutely. It dives headfirst into the ethical dilemmas of messing with something as fundamental as time and the consequences that come with it.
And we see those consequences play out, right? Relationships fall apart, their sense of self gets all distorted, and their actions lead to some pretty serious outcomes, stuff they didn't see coming.
It's a mess. And one of the sources pointed out that this whole breakdown of their lives, it's like a metaphor for what could happen with unchecked technological advancement. Just because we can do something doesn't mean we should.
It's like they say, with great power comes great responsibility, except in Primer, that power isn't a radioactive spider bite, it's the ability to manipulate time itself. And the characters aren't exactly handling that responsibility with grace.
Nope, not at all. They're kind of making a mess of things, to be honest.
Big time. And it makes you think, it's almost like the film is holding up a mirror to our own society, to our obsession with pushing boundaries, innovating without always stopping to think about the ethics of it all.
It's a good point. We're so focused on what we can do that we don't always consider the should we.
Right. I mean, think about artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, even social media algorithms. All these powerful tools with the potential to change the world, for better or for worse.
And Primer is like a wake-up call, reminding us that we need to be careful. Approach these advancements with humility, you know?
Yeah.
Really think through the risks.
Because, like we see in the film, even the tiniest change in the past can create a ripple effect that changes the future in ways we can't even imagine.
It's a butterfly effect on steroids.
Totally. But you know, we've talked a lot about the philosophical side of things, but for me, one of the most powerful aspects of Primer is how it explores human nature.
Oh, for sure. At its heart, Primer is about ambition, greed, how power can corrupt even the best of intentions. Throw time travel into the mix, and things get really messy.
It's a recipe for disaster. But it also shows us that time travel isn't just a scientific concept. It's deeply personal, emotional even. The characters are constantly struggling with questions of identity, choice, and the weight of knowing too much.
Yeah, it really messes with their heads. One of the sources we looked at suggested that the film's crazy structure, all the fragmented timelines and shifting perspectives, it reflects what's going on inside the characters' minds.
So they're literally lost in a maze of their own making.
Pretty much. Unable to outrun the consequences of their choices.
Which brings us back to that question we brought up before. Does free will even exist in a world where time travel is possible? It's a toughie.
It really is. On one hand, the characters are constantly making choices, trying to shape their destinies. But then you have all these causal loops, these predetermined events.
Right, like they're stuck in this cycle where their actions seem inevitable.
It's a paradox, for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe the film is suggesting that free will and determinism aren't mutually exclusive, like they're both at play, constantly influencing each other.
That's a lot to unpack. I don't know if there's even a right answer.
Probably not. But that's what I love about Primer. It forces you to think, to explore these big questions without necessarily finding all the answers.
And in the process, it makes us think about our own lives, the choices we make, the impact we have on the world.
It's like a ripple effect, expanding outwards.
So as we wrap up our deep dive, what's the biggest takeaway for you? What's going to stick with you after the credits roll?
For me, it's that Primer isn't just a time travel movie. It's about being human. Our capacity for both amazing things and for, well, messing things up pretty badly.
And ultimately, the greatest mysteries aren't out there in the universe. They're right here inside our own heads.
Beautifully said. And while Primer might leave us with more questions than answers.
Which, let's be honest, it totally does.
It's a good thing. It makes you curious, it challenges you, and it encourages you to keep exploring the unknown, both in ourselves and in the world around us.
Well said. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into Primer.
Thanks for sticking with us on this wild ride.
We hope you enjoyed it, and maybe you'll even feel inspired to give Primer another watch. Ponder those complexities and maybe even start your own deep dive into the mysteries of time, technology, and what it means to be human.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.